Roger Corman, he's one of the most legendary B-movie directors that's ever lived. He's still alive. He'll be 89 this year in 2015. And although most of you may not know who he is, he's mentored the careers of a lot of what we consider to be the most legendary filmmakers today. Francis Ford Coppola, who made the Godfather trilogy, made his first real film under Corman's tutelage, and Martin Scorsese, the director of Goodfellas, The Departed, Shutter Island, and most recently The Wolf of Wall Street. The first films he directed were produced by Corman, and Roger Corman really helped him get started. Jonathan Demme, who you may not know his name, but he directed Silence of the Lambs, one of the greatest horror films ever made, and so far the only one to win Best Picture at the Oscars. And last but not least, James Cameron, who you'll know as the director of The Terminator, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, and Avatar. They all got their start working for Corman in the 60s and 70s, 80s I think. Anyway, a ton of directors who we consider the greats today got their start with Corman, and many people see him as an inspiration. Quentin Tarantino, who's my favorite director of all time, credits Corman with inspiring him through his movies, and Roger Corman also gave a lot of actors their big breaks in his movies, which include Jack Nicholson, Sandra Bullock, and Charles Bronson. Yes, Charles Bronson got one of his first leading roles under the name Bronson, called Machine Gun Kelly in 1958. And Roger Corman, most of the films he made were very low budget. They were B movies. And in the 50s, he mostly made cheesy sci-fi films. And as time went on to the 60s, he sort of morphed into horror. And in the 60s, he made a bunch of Edgar Allan Poe adaptations. He made this movie called Tales of Terror, which was an anthology film based on many stories. He also made an adaptation of The Raven, which had Boris Karloff, Vincent Price, and a very young Jack Nicholson and Peter Lorre. And it's not the greatest adaptation, but at the same time, it's pretty enjoyable. It's a horror comedy other than anything else. Like, it takes some kind of creepy elements, but mostly it's just an excuse to have some goofy setup. And the stars in that movie do a very good job of carrying the comedy. He also adapted House of Usher and The Pit and the Pendulum. Roger Corman, and then in the 70s, he sort of moved into the exploitation genre, making a lot of films that had exploitive violence and a lot of unnecessary T&A shots, sex scenes, and mostly like films that were about like horror films involving a lot of gore shots and women in prison type movies, and action films starring actors who were either kind of big at the time but didn't have anywhere to go, or he would use actors who were once huge and they needed the work. And Roger Corman himself has admitted that a lot of his business is based around making money. He wrote a book called How I Made 10,000 Movies and Didn't Lose a Dime. And a running joke was that he would negotiate a deal in a payphone, shoot the movie from the payphone, and secure the theater rights in the payphone. None of that was true, but it's pretty funny and it matches up to him. And a lot of his students, like Jonathan Demme, Coppola, Joe Dante, the guy who made Gremlins, as a thank you for all the help he gave them in the start, they often give him cameos in their big movies today. Joe Dante gave Corman a cameo in his early horror film The Howling. In The Godfather Part 2, Francis Ford Coppola cast him as one of the congressmen or judges, I think, questioning Michael Corleone during the hearing scenes. And in The Silence of the Lambs, when the character Jack Crawford is being eaten out by the FBI boss for fooling Hannibal Lecter, the FBI boss is Roger Corman. And then Jonathan Demme's next movie, Philadelphia, when the trial is happening between Denzel Washington and Tom Hanks against the company that fired Hanks, one of the people they question is played by Roger Corman. His name's even in the opening credits. He made I've seen a lot of his movies. I haven't seen all of them. He directed about over 50 movies, and he's produced over, I don't know if it's over 200, but I'm pretty sure it's in that range. And he's made a ton of movies, and many directors credit him. They're thankful to him, and they have a lot of great, nice things to say about him. And in 2010, Roger Corman was given an honorary Academy Award for everything he contributed to the film industry, and I think he deserved it. We really got a lot to thank him for. The earliest film of his that I've seen is this movie, It Conquered the World. I found out about it by going to this restaurant in Disney World called the Sci-Fi Diner, where they play kind of 50s B-movie trailers while you sit at a table, make it feel like a drive-in. And this copy was very expensive. It was almost $70. Yeah, it's kind of going out of print. And I always find that to be sad. And I watched it, and it's what you would expect. It's cheesy and campy. Some of the acting is bad, but it's enjoyable. It stars Peter Graves, who you guys may remember from Airplane, and older people might know from Mission Impossible, the show. And one of the main characters here, in one of his earliest roles, is Lee Van Cleef, who was in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. He was the bad in the title. And the premise is an alien creature comes to Earth, and, like the title says, it tries to conquer Earth. And Peter Graves is a scientist trying to stop it. Lee Van Cleef is another scientist who is being mind-controlled or manipulated by it. And the creature, it, seems to have the power to cause mass panic and hysteria and manipulate people. And the monster in this movie, it, is hilarious when you see it, because some people describe it as kind of being a walking pickle with stick arms. I don't know if I would call it that, but it's when you see it, it's obvious. It's like a blow-up doll. Like you just blow into a plastic toy and it inflates. That's kind of what it looks like. And whenever the characters bump into it, you can see the kind of rubbery costume just press in. It's hilarious, and Lee Van Cleef, even this early stage of his career, shows some very good acting skills, even though his character doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I noticed this with a lot of the older B movies, and this still happens today with a lot of low-budget B flicks that weren't really that well made or well thought out. They usually have very complicated and hard to follow plots. You gotta pay attention a little just to know what's going on. This movie was made fun of on Mystery Science Theater 3000, and the scene that convinced me why was where Lee Van Cleef is talking with his wife, and they're arguing about something I can't fully remember at this time, but ultimately it ends with him saying he's trying hard, and she's encouraging him to try hard, and she says, "I want it to be hard." I lost it there. I just broke up. I just burst out laughing when I heard that. And this is a box set of his movies, about 8, all ranging from the 50s all the way to the 70s. There's this movie here called A Bucket of Blood. It's kind of like a House of Wax ripoff from what people describe. I haven't seen House of Wax, but when I tell the plot, people say it's similar. It stars one of Corman's. Corman had a thing where you would take the same actors in one movie and carry them into the next. Like, he'd have like a team of actors that he'd reuse over and over for like supporting characters. One of them was a guy named Dick Miller, and A Bucket of Blood was kind of his only leading role in anything, period. And Dick Miller, who's been in a lot of cool stuff like Gremlins. He's a good character actor. He can be likable, he can be an asshole, a dick. In A Bucket of Blood, he plays a really messed up in the head dork. It's a comedy, but it's also a horror film, and it's one of those good comedy horrors where it can be both kind of creepy and eerie, but also make you giggle and chuckle. He plays a guy who wants to be an artist, and the problem is he can't do art. Like, he works at a cafe diner where people perform poetry, you know those things. And they also show off art shows. And Dick Miller's character, Walter, finds a way to make art. After accidentally killing a cat, he covers the cat in clay and shows it off as a sculpture. And eventually this leads to him doing this to people as well. And it's eerie, but it's also funny. Like, some people are amazed, like, wow. And others are unnerved and kind of suspect what is really going on. There's a great scene where he chops someone's head off, and he goes to his boss who runs the cafe diner place, and he shows him his new creation, which is the severed head covered in clay. And the boss is like, "You made a bust?" I love that scene. And in A Bucket of Blood was made in 1958, and surprising for a film in the 50s. Like, okay, some films are doing this, but this was the first film from that area I saw that had this kind of material. There was a lot of like drug references in it, which is pretty cool for the times it came out in. Like, you wouldn't expect to see in that movie from that period. Like, you didn't think that came around to like the 60s. And it's pretty funny. Like, they talk about heroin, and it involves a lot of misunderstanding, that kind of shit. I like Bucket of Blood. It's funny and amusing. And Roger Corman, around that time, like, he also made a movie called Attack of the Crab Monsters, and this other movie called Not of This Earth, that were a double feature in 1957. Attack of the Crab Monsters, you can guess what the plot is by the title, but once again, even surprisingly for a low-grade movie, the plot is more complex than you suspect. It's about giant mutant crabs that are able to destroy an island, like cause the land to cave into the sea, just by using their minds. And I don't understand. It's okay. Kind of boring at times, a little, but funny, and the scenes of the island crumbling apart are kind of impressive. The crab effects are fucking horrible. Like, it's obviously just someone holding kind of a puppet that they're just going like and hoping the arms wiggle on the sides. Not of This Earth. Not of This Earth is honestly one of the greatest and genuinely creepy horror sci-fi films I've seen from the 1950s. It co-stars Beverly Garland, who was the lead in It Conquered the World. I think she and Roger Corman were a couple at the time. And the premise is an alien has come to Earth to try and steal human blood because his species on his planet is dying. And they find that human blood can save their race. So he goes around killing people and taking their blood. And he's able to do it by just looking at them with his eyes. And throughout the film he wears sunglasses to avoid doing it accidentally. And I repeat, it actually is kind of scary in times. I really like it. It is really a good movie. And there's a scene that actually made me flinch when I first saw it, where there's this alien animal that flies through the air. It's kind of like a bowl-shaped alien animal, and it lands on someone's head, and apparently kills them, and the person falls over, and blood just oozes out. When you see it, you will see why it's kind of flinch-worthy. And the alien, the antagonist, he is very good and very well acted. And there is some comedic elements to it, primarily involving a chauffeur character who works for the alien and doesn't know what he really is. And Garland plays kind of a nurse whose job is to look after him and make sure that he stays in good, healthy shape. That's kind of all I have to say about that. I love Not of This Earth. It is a good film. I say you see it. And then in 1960, Roger Corman made what is probably, well, this movie holds the world record for the shortest movie filming shoot in history. 2 days, with about a few hours worth of reshoots, but nonetheless, it is the shortest filming shoot ever. Little Shop of Horrors. I'm thinking some of you might have heard of the remake, The Musical, that was on the stage and was adapted in the 80s into a movie starring Rick Moranis. And a lot of people don't know this, but the play itself was an adaptation or retooling of this movie. And those of you who don't know the plot is an awkward nerd named Seymour Krelborn, who works at a plant shop that's kind of going out of business, buys this mysterious plant, and it kind of operates like a Venus flytrap, and he doesn't know what to feed it, and through accident, cutting his finger, he finds out that it eats blood, and the more blood it eats, the more it grows, and it ends up at the point where the plant's kind of shaped like this. This is how its mouth opens. It ends up talking, and it has the famous line that everybody has quoted from it. Feed me! feed me. And this is one of the weirdest comedies you could ever see. There are some creepy moments, but overall, it's primarily just a comedy. It has some of the weirdest characters you're ever gonna see, like characters who act bizarre, and it fits this world this takes place in. It has a hokey, cheesy feel, but at the same time, it looks much better than something that was shot in only 2 days. Like, it's better than you would think. Like, there's a funny scene. There are funny scenes involving the plant eating people, gore, and people just rubbing off death. Like, there's a scene where a character talks about one of their kids dying recently, and he says it's so, yeah, my kid died the other day. Tragic. Played with matches. Like, it just doesn't mean anything. And, Jack Nicholson got one of his earliest roles in this, and it's kind of the role that people say really showed at the beginning, before he hit it big, that he really had talent. And it's only a small role. He only has one scene, but it is memorable. It is the most memorable scene in the whole movie. Seymour goes to the dentist, and the dentist for this town that he lives in is a sadist who enjoys torturing people by just drilling their teeth in without Novocaine. I don't know if they had Novocaine in the 60s, but that's what he enjoys doing, and he laughs when he does it. And Seymour, afraid of the guy, ends up killing him. And then Jack comes in, and with his raised eyebrows and wide grin, he asks for an appointment, and Seymour, not knowing what to do, just says he's the doctor and takes him in, even though he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. And what makes this scene memorable is that Nicholson's character is himself kind of a sadist in a way. Like, he enjoys pain, and he is giggling with glee, knowing he's gonna get a lot of pain in his teeth. Like, yeah, like, he gets off on it, and when Seymour says, like, this is gonna hurt you more than it hurts me, he's like, oh, goody goody, here it comes. And when he drills, he's like, ah! Ah! Oh, don't stop now! Yeah, it is fucking hilarious. And this is a great movie as well. And like Not of This Earth, I say watch it. If you want to. Roger Corman also, in the 60s, he got into the biker film genre. And in 1966, he made a movie called The Wild Angels, starring Peter Fonda. And it's basically a movie about the Hells Angels and how deadly or violent or bad they are. But also shows a little human side to the Hells Angels, particularly Fonda as their leader. And from what I remember, last time I saw it, it showed a lot of good drama in it, such as the Hells Angels talk out against the authorities and the people who judge them for just riding their Harleys and dressing the way they do. They demand to be respected and get what they want. And this person they're yelling at asks, what do you want? And Fonda he doesn't know what he wants, and they all really don't know. Like, they're fighting and they don't know what they're fighting for. And he just is like, we want to get loaded! There's a scene involving the funeral of one of their members, and this is a crazy scene. If I was to describe it for you, like, you would think it's funny, but when you see it, it's not. It's pretty crazy. You don't know what to think. You're a little disturbed, but the whole film is very well done. Like, Roger Corman did a good job directing it, and it was through this film, which cost about, I think, $300,000, that Peter Fonda became inspired to get that kind of money, and 3 years later, make Easy Rider. So thank you, Corman, because Easy Rider is an awesome movie, and it's an amazing film showing a period of the 1960s. Roger Corman, he worked with Ray Milland, an Oscar-winning actor who in 1945 won the Academy Award for playing an alcoholic in The Lost Weekend. And in the 60s, Milland, at an older age, starred in quite a few of his movies. Two of them were Premature Burial. I don't have a lot to say about that one because I have a little hard time remember it, but from what I remember, it was a very clever film about a man who fears being buried alive, hence prematurely. And there's a cool scene where he shows the crypt he wants to be buried in, and he set it up in a way that if he goes in before he's fully dead, he has many escape traps, escape doors installed in the coffin and the crypt that could allow him to escape. That's the best I can remember about this movie, so that's all I have to say on that. The other movie is called X, The Man with the X-Ray Eyes. This is a pretty good thriller. It's basically Milan playing a scientist that does an experiment on himself, and he develops the ability to see through things, X-ray vision. And at first it's a little funny, like he sees through people's clothes, seeing them naked, like asses and breasts shaking. But as it goes on, he begins to suffer greatly for this, at first thought, gift, such as he can't close his eyes without seeing through it. Henceforth, he can't sleep. And as time goes on, his ability to see through things, which at first he uses to try and help people, like figure out why people are sick, like if they have cancer, like see into their body. But over time, it just gets him in trouble in ways. And I may have drifted there a second, but that's the plot. Like, he sees through things and gets him in trouble. Like, he tries to win at gambling, like blackjack. And overall, the X-ray vision is just driving him to the brink of insanity. And there's a powerful scene where he's at a point where he can't get any further in his X-ray vision. Like, he could probably see all the way into the end of the solar system if he could, and he just breaks down crying, and he can't take it anymore. The ending is pretty powerful, surprisingly powerful, and another film I recommend. In 1970, Roger Corman directed a crime film called Bloody Mama that was kind of inspired by the true events of Ma Barker. Bloody Mama was based kind of on the true stories of Ma Barker and her sons, a family of criminals that robbed banks with machine guns and did a bunch of violent John Dillinger crimes in the 1930s. And Bloody Mama basically tells the story of this psychotic bank robbing mother and her team of sons. And this movie is full of a lot of drama and a lot of actually disturbing material, especially for a film in 1970. Ma Barker is played by Shelley Winters, and she does the role very well. And this is at the point in her life where she was kind of fat, and that kind of helps out in the idea. Like, one part of her that's big is that she's a bit of a sexual predator, and we see throughout the film that she apparently engages in incest with her sons. And there's a scene where she and her sons have taken a powerful businessman hostage, and they have him blindfolded for weeks, and she rapes him pretty much, like forces him to have sex with her. It's the whole premise, the scene, everything, it's disturbing, and it has a tragic, sad end, but there's also some powerful character moments, such as one of the sons is probably even more psychotic than his mother, is more than happy to kill innocent people, but he has a very human side. The idea is Ma took the boys from their father when they were young to go on their bank robbing sprees, and this son, named Homer, finds that he can't kill anybody who has the same colored eyes as his father. And, like, when he's about to shoot someone, one of his brothers points out, he has the same eyes as Pa, and Homer just breaks down crying because he still feels so attached to his dad. Okay, yeah, Bloody Mama, surprisingly, has a lot of powerful scenes. It is a great crime film. It also has in it Bruce Dern playing the jailhouse lover of one of the sons who goes to prison, and Bruce Dern does a very good job playing at first kind of another sexual predator, but becomes a pretty cool lover. And this is the son and his cellmate. They're a very interesting gay couple, especially for a 70s film. Like, one is kind of soft, but at the same time he can shoot and be as violent as the others, and his cellmate, lover, boyfriend, I'll go with boyfriend, he's very tough and sadistic, from what I saw. He wasn't the main character, but he had just enough time to be established. I liked them, and I liked the relationship I saw between them. It was a very good, villain gay couple portrayal. Like, I don't think there's a lot of those, and it was cool. And lastly, about Bloody Mama. It was one of the earliest roles for Robert De Niro. Yeah. De Niro plays one of the Barker sons, and his character is like the drug addict son of the group. And De Niro, to get into character, because he's such a method actor, he lost 30 pounds to play a heroin addict, and at one point he actually slept in an open casket, because there's many scenes where the family sleeps at a funeral home, and that was a very good. Robert De Niro was awesome, and he's almost unrecognizable with the voice he goes with. Yeah, overall, Bloody Mama is pretty good. Well, this is embarrassing, kind of. I don't have much time left on my camera to record, so I won't be able to get through all the movies I wanted to get through. But with what time I have left, I'll just say it's been really fun. I've been really enjoyed talking about the Corman films, and maybe another time I'll get to these. Rock and Roll High School, Suburbia, from the director of Wayne's World, Death Race 2000. You probably know the remake starring Jason Statham. The Warrior and the Sorceress and Barbarian Queen. The remake of Not This Earth starring former porn star Tracy Lords. Yeah. The Slumber Party Massacre Trilogy. Yeah, I got a lot to say about that when the time comes. Humanoids from the Deep. I believe it was... the music was done by James Horner, who composed I Know Titanic, because he won the Oscar for that. Piranha, one of the first films from Joe Dante, and a follow-up to Death Race 2000, Death Sport, both starring David Carradine. And this has been a lot of fun. Really enjoyed it, and hope you want to check out some of Roger Corman's movies. A lot of those I just showed you he just produced, but they're known as the Roger Corman Cult Classics Collection. So, been great talking to you, and this has been another attempt at a video review.